Okay. So give yourself those few moments of settling in. Notice just how it feels to come into this posture. Just to remind you, weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back. Turning from the center of your body, feeling your arms drawn around. Moving as though you're in water. Just have this image of you trying to pull your arms around through water, and notice if that makes any change to your movement, to the feel of the movement inside your body. Bring your attention down to your legs again, and I'm going to come a bit closer, so some of my body will disappear, I expect. So if you check out this leg, my left leg, I get myself right. Okay, that was it. So as I turn, I don't want this to happen to my knee. Can you see how my knee's turning in here? In fact, both knees are now turning in. So a couple of things here. What I want to do is to try and maintain this structure in my knee, and that requires conditioning, because as I turn my body, it's quite natural for my knees to want to the whole leg really to want to go with me. So I have to. I'm just still trying to position myself. I have to actively do something about that. And the thing to do when I turn, this will happen again to my left knee, the one on your right. And so my counter to that is to rotate my knee out. That means I'm using muscles on the outside of the leg. I'm stretching muscles on the inside of the leg. And what I want to do is to do it as I turn, so you don't actually see it moving. So that's something that takes a while to build up. You'll have to think about it quite carefully to begin with. But if you give it a chance to build, you'll see that over a period of time, it will help. You're not going to do yourself massive damage by having a little bit of movement. Your knee joint does have a certain amount of natural sideways movement, but it's something that you want to think about. Perhaps more importantly, though, is to think about trying to soften, to relax in hips, knees, ankles. And this is quite difficult. And again, I would recommend focusing on one leg and just seeing, in my experience, if you can get your knee to relax, then your hip and your ankle will relax. And I think one of the ways to do this is to just have your weight in the other leg, and then so my weight's in this leg, the one on your left, so my other knee is more likely to be able to relax. Then what I do is I try and keep that feeling of relaxation. I can feel my knee twitching and move across. Our knees do try and lock up. When they don't, though, you'll really feel it in your legs, in the muscles of your legs, I should say. So this process of getting one knee to relax will automatically make the thigh muscles work harder, which tallies with what we know about the structure of the knee and how our knees function and the quadricep muscles in particular at the front of the thighs are the ones that mostly support the knee. All the muscles of the legs do, of course. And so when you do manage to relax the knee, it's the quadricep muscles that you quite often feel are beginning to work a great deal harder. So it takes a focus of attention to start that process, but it takes time to maintain it. What was I going to say? Yeah. So what will happen is when these muscles, in particular the quadriceps, get tired and they stiffen up and they're no longer functioning, then your knee will stiffen up to compensate. But all the time you can keep your knees soft and the muscles are still working, then you'll be suspended in this posture. And the muscles of your legs and your back will be the ones that would take the main load. So it's almost like, I've never been in one, but I can imagine that if you go bungee jumping, which I've never fancied really, but if you go bungee jumping and they put you in this elastic harness and they drop you down, and then when you see people stop, they're on an elastic cord, of course, but there's a little bit of give in the straps. Otherwise, you'd end up being crushed by the impact. And so, in the same way, if you can imagine the muscles of your body being like those elastic straps, or maybe something like a baby bouncer. Some clothing, lycra clothing that people often wear in gyms, is also a bit like that. So those kind of images. And in order for your muscles to be able to function in that way, and to continue functioning in that way, then what's going to have to happen is those muscles are going to have to get stronger and work better. And that comes with practice. So there's a direct relationship between allowing the joints of your body, and I was talking about knees specifically, to soften. And when they soften, they allow the weight through. When they stiffen up, it means that your knees are carrying the weight of your body, which is very bad news for your knees. It's like when we were kids, if you jumped off a wall, probably any adults around reminded you to bend your knees when you landed, because that way your legs absorb the weight of your body. So they will remain soft like that all the time the muscles are working. But when the muscles fail, when they get tired, they'll stiffen up, and that's when we start to feel the impact of our weight on our knees. So it's important to practice these, and to every now and then while you're doing this, focus on a knee, just one knee, and think, well, I'm going to get it to relax, and then when you've done that, focus on the other knee. And what you'll probably find is that when you focus on the second knee, the first knee will stiffen up. But over a period of time, then both knees will soften, because they'll have the support of your legs. It will make the muscles of your legs work harder though. And then just raising your arm. So you may get the occasional twinge in your knee, but if you're getting regular sharp pain in your knee joint, then it's important that you work on that. And then just shake out. All of the exercises that we do are very good for turning the legs, because all of them require us to be in this Wu Chi stance. However, if you're looking for a particular exercise for the knees, then I would say this one, which we'll come to later, of course, but the weight change one is a very good one, because this way, as you move your weight, you can again focus on how much you're able to soften your knee before it actually stiffens up, and yeah, you can begin to work with that. Now, when we sink down, still thinking about knees really, when you sink down, allow your hips to drop back, and then you push up. And we call it sitting. Now, if you would sit down in a chair, as you sat down, you would allow your weight to go into the chair. What you're trying to do as you sit back here is to allow your weight to go into your muscles, not just the quadriceps. I was talking about those specifically with the knee, but you want to feel that the muscles of your legs above and below the knee and buttocks, lower back, are like almost like hollow balloons that fill up with your weight and then release it. And also at the same time, of course, gradually transmitting the weight downwards. So perhaps thinking of your muscles like sponges is a better idea. Put a sponge under a tap, it absorbs the weight of your body, and eventually, it absorbs the water, and eventually the water starts to drain out the bottom of the sponge. And that's essentially what we want to happen with our weight as we sink down. And your awareness of what's happening in your body is crucial here. Because if you can really listen to what's happening and note the movements and note what's working and what isn't working for you, then you're going to be far more likely to work properly with your body and creatively. So now bringing your hands around, cradling the ball, and just notice, just let your arms follow, but try and keep some of your attention in your legs, hips, so that you don't just blank them out. You keep some sense of what's going on there. That's quite difficult to do. But eventually those kind of things become part of what I've talked about as the background to everything that we do. I don't want you to ignore your arms. One more time. Changing to the wild goose. Another idea, which, I mean, again, the thing about keeping your knees in line, which might help, is an image that is sometimes used in Tai Chi, that we're holding a ball between the tops of our legs, and you just squeeze in slightly. And that means that if you're maintaining that ball holding position, then obviously you're achieving the same thing. This is thinking about when we turn, not twisting the knee about and so on. So if that works better for you, that's fine. That will also have a conditioning effect on your body. The very act of imagining holding the ball leads you into the action of doing it. If you were holding the ball there, you'd have to maintain some kind of gentle pressure. And then parting the clouds. dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So with this set of movements, it follows a kind of broad pattern that the simplest exercises are at the start of this the set. This is something that I came across, an idea that I came across when I read about the history of the 24-step form, which I know some of you know. It was the first, to the best of my knowledge, the first of the modern shortened versions of Tai Chi forms. It was the first one that I learned and taught, and I always felt it was quite a straightforward form to teach, because the more straightforward movements come at the beginning of the form, and it gets more complicated. So you could establish really basic ideas, and I just thought that was coincidence compared to some of the traditional forms, which start off with quite a lot of changes of direction and things like that. But it turns out that was quite deliberate, and I thought that was quite a good approach to these things. So I've always tried to reflect that in all my classes by beginning the classes with something very simple and very straightforward, or a collection of movements, simple and straightforward. Not too much to think about in terms of, you know, what are the arms doing. So we get used to this idea of a sort of, I don't want to quite separate out that much, but it's almost like there are two aspects, or maybe more, to your attention. One is what is happening in the foreground, which is the exercises, the actual exercise that you're doing, the choreography of it in part, and how it's working within your body, and so on and so forth. But part of the background that's pretty much constant from one movement to another is things like, you know, awareness of posture, alignment, stuff I've been saying about the knees, and all those things that are so basic to Tai Chi, as a sort of slightly subconscious awareness of what's behind the movements. Now this time, pushing in 4 directions. Actually, first of all, just the first and the last part. So again, I'm going to come closer. When I push out, notice that my hands are slightly in front of my body. Likewise, when I push up. So use this movement for a few moments just to reflect on what's happening in your back. Where can you feel the patterns of movement up and down your back and across your back? Never moving so far that you create a tightening. So the overall feeling is of your back being very gently massaged, feeling the fluidity in your back and spine. Now this time, hold this posture, make sure that your back's comfortable, and then just gently turn your body from side to side. And see whether you can maintain that feeling of your back being massaged. Now, if you get it as you start the turn, but very quickly lose it, it could be that you're turning too far. If you don't get it at all, it could be that you're doing something like this. You're just turning in the upper part of your body. You're thinking about your arms and your hands. But this is where the focus of your attention should be, in that area just above your hips, between your hips and your waist. If you turn there, then it will be like this. If I show you this, it's like if I, it's got little drumsticks on it, but if I do this, if I spin the handle, the whole thing moves. But if I try and turn it there, for instance, it's going to break. So have this idea, and it's only an image, that your upper body can sit and rotate on your hips like that as a whole unit. What you don't want is sort of like the one bit to get bent back. And then going into the whole sequence, because your hands return to that central part of your body, you can use the awareness of your hands to bring your attention back here, which means that now that's where your attention is seated and you can focus on the turn there and back. You may notice that you lose some of the effectiveness of your arms and your hands for a few rounds as you do this, but you will get it back. And of course, if you can get that turn in the middle of your body, then it also has an impact on your knees, because once again, we want to be careful not to twist the knees up. Sink your hips back so that you're not carrying the weight of your body in your hips and your lower back and your waist, and you'll be able to move much more freely through the center of your body. You'll get more movement and you'll get a better fluidity of movement, and that will express itself in your arms. And if you get to the point where these muscles in the thighs are beginning to shake a little bit, give them a shake out the tension, shake out the tightness, give them a chance to recover. It's basically they need to build, and you need to keep the blood flowing through your legs for that to happen. It'll come in time. If you could feel that sense of what I described as an elastic harness when I was talking about the legs, maybe you can start feeling that also through your upper body. Always following this rhythm of extension and contraction. Do this one more time. Now, as you make the change, again, come a bit closer, let your hand drop down, hands drop down, draw the fingers of one hand back, gently push down through the heel of the palm. And at the same time, just feel that there's a push out from the side of your body as it expands. Keep your elbow slightly curved. And then down the center line. Try that again. Draw your fingers back gently. Push downwards through the heel of your palm, through the expansion through the side of your body. Hopefully this stops you trying to sort of pull your arm out with your fingers. And then if it's comfortable, add the turn. Bearing in mind everything I've said about the turning so far today. and then change sides. So again, to remind you, fingers draw back gently, but the heel of your palm pushes down. Once again, if it's comfortable for you, turn. So now rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Remember, hips go back very carefully. Remember, yeah, still a bit chilly, your back might be a bit tight. One more. And then polishing the table. One more time. And then just drop your hands down and do little turns again, just to loosen up your shoulders and your back after that. And then give your legs a shake. Move around a bit, so that can also help to encourage the circulation through the muscles, which of course is part of the problem. When muscles get tired, they're running out of oxygen and nutrients, and so we need to get the blood to flow through them. Okay, so taking a slightly wider stance. Now be careful with this, and bear in mind what I was saying about the knees. When we do the wider stance, it's somehow easier to let your weight drop down between your legs. So just go nice and easy, go as far as you wish. But the full stance, turn your toes out to 45 degrees, then turn your heels out to 45 degrees, or more or less, not quite 45 degrees, then turn the toes out again. And so this is the horse riding stance. And the reason I think it's easier in some ways is because you've actually got space. That ball is a good deal bigger. You've actually got space to imagine that either your pelvis or maybe even the whole of your torso is somehow slipping down between the legs, which is part of the feeling that you're actually looking for. So the opposite of that is this. It is possible to do the routing down here, but it's a lot more difficult. But paradoxically, the wider stance is arguably better for our legs. It's quite a strong stance though, so it will work the muscles of your legs more. So just watch out for that, and just transferring your weight from side to side. One of the reasons for having the wider stance, we're going to be doing part in the wild horse's mane, and you really only would get about 60% of your weight into each leg. So in the narrower stance, you're more likely to get that wrong, because if I'm in a narrow stance and I go to move 60%, you can see, if you look at my hip, can you see how it's out there? Now that's putting a straight, that's effectively doing that to my knee and my leg. So that's potentially putting a strain on my leg. But in the wider stance, that's less likely to happen. We still have to think about this knee collapsing inwards, but you're only moving 60% of your weight, but you also turn a little bit. So again, one of the things that can create that problem of pulling your knee out of line is if you either are stiffening your hips still and everything's locked up, or else you just simply turn in too far. Then you don't have to turn very far. A kind of rough rule of thumb is that you would look towards the direction that the foot that you're on is facing, which, you know, maybe not even that far, no further than that point. Now with your left hand, just hold your left hand in front of your belly, go into your left leg, and as you go into your left leg and turn, let that just move your hand, so that rather than fingers pointing across, as you turn, your fingers now pointing in the same direction as the toes underneath them, and then you raise your hand to just under shoulder height, and that's the position for parting the wild horse's mane. So we go from here, so you go from your right leg, you move across, you turn, and your hand comes up. You come back. So the first few moments, it feels like you're pushing into something with your shoulder and then with your elbow, and then as you turn your hand, it's like you've got a door there and you've got a cup in your hand, and what you're doing is you're leaning against the door to push it open, and then you turn, pass the cup through the door to somebody. That's all. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is because what can happen very easily is that our hands distract us, and when our hands distract us, everything starts to go wrong because they feel too much of our attention. But also in the process of that distraction, the arms have to go further. Now look, I've moved my arms a long way, and look what it's done to my leg here. So actually, between here and here, it's not moving that far, but we do feel the movement from inside. Now try that with your right hand. So moving from your left leg, moving to your right leg, turn towards the right leg a little to position the hand, and then just lift it up and back. Move across again, shoulder, elbow, turn in, and then up. Parting the wild horse's mane is a delightful movement. It's always very, very easy to overdo it. I know I did for about the first 2 years of doing Tai Chi. So that's the main part of the arm movements for parting the wild horse's mane. This time, from this position, move your weight back into your left foot and do nothing with your arm. Just let it be drawn across, and then you turn both hands palming. You move across into your right foot, and you turn, again, not too far, push across. The top hand is going to go straight down, nothing fancy, nothing elaborate. It just goes from here to here, ends up in front of your right hip. You move across to here. Don't do anything by, turn your hands or anything. Come back. Your hands rotate at this point. And then you move across into your left foot and turn. So in stages, it's 1. Right hand is palm up, left hand is palm down. 2. Right hand is palm up, left hand is palm down, until you get to the end of the movement, then you turn them in. 3, move across into your right foot, and 4, you turn. And then 1, left hand is palm up, right hand is palm down. 2, you come across, keeping your hands the same, left palm up, right palm down. And at the end of 2, you turn your hands palm in. So they're now facing each other. 3, move across, and 4, turn. So you need to go through all of those stages in order. It's like a set of directions that I've given you to get to the shops or wherever you're going. Turn left here, turn right there, cross the road, and so on and so forth. If you miss any one of those stages, then you have to go back to the beginning almost and start all over again. But when we've got those stages, our bodies just begin to flow much more naturally. There's less stress in our minds about what we're supposed to do because we're very clear on what is happening. Less tightness in our body, more certainty about the movement. And all of those help with the flow of the movement. So the flow just naturally emerges out of the precision of the movement. Parting the wild horse's mane. The name suggests a real soft fluidity. Okay, and then just shake out. People get themselves in an awkward tangle with parting the wild horse's mane, thinking that they have to do more with their arms than they think that they do. So, for instance, if I swing my left arm out here and I do this, and it's right over there rather than there. Remember, it's supposed to be there, but it's out there. Then when I bring my weight back there, what I'm supposed to do now is turn my hands in and hold the ball. But they're not holding the ball. Look, I'm dropping the ball. So then I have to do something extra. I have to think, well, I've got to hold the ball. And I see people doing that a great deal in this movement. They go, oh, where's the ball? I've got to hold the ball. Whereas if they did it properly, if they did it here and they came back and they turned their body, I turn my hands in, the ball's there. I don't have to go looking for it. It's already there. Another thing that people do is from here, they do all sorts of fancy stuff with their hands. They turn them around, they wind them about, and then they're all over the place. Whereas if you look, I'm going to come closer. Top hand goes from here to here. That's all. No fancy movements from here to here. Bottom hand, palm up, goes from here to here. Once again, no kind of twisting or fancy movements. It doesn't need it. It's a beautiful movement in its own right. It doesn't need embellishing. So think of Tai Chi in general. All the movements that we do should actually have more of a resemblance to what we think of as a Zen garden. I'm sure we're all familiar with the photographs and the films of the garden. Lots of space there, just gravel or pebbles with a single flower in, rather than an overcrowded flower bed. Tai Chi is like the Zen garden. All of it is like the Zen garden. And so what we find is that any individual stage in any of the movements is actually quite simple. So if you're prepared to follow those stages, then I suppose it's a bit like gardening. You need a lot of patience, but don't hurry the movement, because too much attention to the hands will lead you astray. Now have one foot forwards and transferring the weight. And remember what I was saying about allowing your knee in particular to relax. So ideally, what would happen is the first part of your body that feels the new weight, if you like, would be the area just behind the ball of the foot that you're moving into. Not your thigh or your knee or your ankle or your calf or even your heel, but the ball of the foot, because that's where the weight should stop. This is going forwards. So everything in between has to soften to allow the weight to move through. We will only feel the weight if we tighten up. You can try that. I mean, try it very carefully, but deliberately tighten your knee as you go forwards, and you'll feel either your knee or your calf muscles straining. I'm laughing because I find it quite difficult to tighten my knee these days. So what's happening is my calf muscles are tensing up, but that's where the weight stops. That's where the movement stops. Going back is a bit more tricky. Going back, the part of your body that first receives the weight is going to be your heel. Now, if you continue moving in that direction, you'll fall over, but your body will stop you falling over. And what will probably happen is this: the knee will stiffen up. It's like, that's tight, and then the knee will hurt. So you want the weight to come towards the ball of the foot. And there's two things to use to do that. One is to consider the alignment of your pelvis. If you're leaning back, so if you're leading with your shoulders, that becomes awkward, and it tilts the pelvis one way or another. If your pelvis can remain level, then it's more likely that you're going to be aligned over with the weight in the ball of your foot, because it will affect it. And the second thing is just to know where your weight should go. So that brings us back to this posture and the exercise that we do. Sometimes we didn't do it today, but rocking forwards and backwards. That will train you to recognize where your weight is supposed to be going. And if you can do that, then eventually, again, that will become quite intuitive to you. And then raising your toes and your heel. So as we progress in Tai Chi, we start to identify certain things. Sometimes a teacher or somebody will point out, you're doing this with your knee, you're doing this with your hip, which can be a bit frustrating, but then you go off and you train. You practice not doing whatever it is, or doing whatever it is you're supposed to do, or whatever, until the habit is broken, and then stepping in. So the thing about knees not twisting in, I'm trying to think how long it took me. A long time, actually. Several years to get to a point where I'm reasonably comfortable with the alignment of my knees. It doesn't always work, but I'm reasonably comfortable with that. And then on the other side. So again, remember, you want the weight to just fall into the ball of your foot, or that area just behind. We call it filling and emptying. And if you get a glass and you put it under a tap, the water doesn't sort of hesitate at the top of the glass and go down a little bit and then think, oh, I'm not sure about that. Water drops to the bottom of the glass and fills upwards. So your foot receives the weight and your legs should fill up with the weight from the sole of your foot up to your hip. That's quite difficult. I think it's quite difficult. So then raising your toes and your heel. What happens when we do this is we start to move beyond the distribution of the weight, 70%, but then as we raise our front toes, it goes to 80% or whatever. That requires a little bit more softening of letting go in your legs, of course. So that's why we do it gradually. Like the glass is nearly full, but we want just a bit more in it. So we turn the tap down. Rather than expecting to be able to judge it right up to the top, we let water just drip in or something. Stepping in. Still letting go in your hips. Remember, this is a better way of thinking of it than bending your knees. Now this time, step through. And then going back. And shake out. Again, we want to practice those ideas without using our hands, so that when we bring our arms into the movement, we are able to give them some attention without actually having without actually losing some of those basics. So that makes this exercise in particular one of the most important ones that we do, because it is the foundation for so many others. So in terms of training, a priority to stand in like this in what we call the Wu Chi stance, to sinking and pushing up. This is all without the hands. And simply transferring the weight are really important things to have as part of your regular practice, both from a point of view of conditioning your body to be able to make the movements, but also from the point of view of being able to do the movements properly without having to focus on them too much. You will retain a sense of awareness of them, but you won't have to keep thinking, oh, where should my knee be? You'll know when it's out of line. So then adding in fisherman cast net. When we bring our arms in to the movement in this way, we realize that in the same way that we want the joints of the legs to soften, we want the joints of our arms and our hands and fingers to soften as well. That's one of the things that the image of moving through water can aid. And again, it's one of those things that is an essential part of developing the flow of the movement. I think this is a really good exercise in lots of ways. We can also practice focusing a lot of our attention on our hands without losing the focus of attention on our lower body. Comfortable in the knowledge that actually it's a very simple movement, very straightforward movement. And then bring your hands in for pushing away, being careful not to get too caught up in the pushing bit of it, because inevitably that means we'll start to thrust out with our arms. The push, if you like to think of it like that, comes through the whole body from the back leg. And then what you can do with this, I'll show you this way around actually, is as you go forwards, you just let your back knee fold in and the heel comes up, and then you bring your foot in. Step back and move your weight back, drawing your hands back, bring the front foot in. It makes it just a little bit more dynamic. So we can incorporate the step in with this exercise. Lovely. And then the other foot forwards. Again, make sure your stance is wide enough to get that sense of there being space for your pelvis to drop, or however you think about it. And then fisherman cast in there. Remember that the wider stance may be one that we're not used to for various reasons. And so again, to begin with, it's not necessarily going to be comfortable. Although hopefully by now, for all of you, you've realised that, and you've had time to let your body adjust. Much of the adjustment would come in the muscles of your legs. So it's fairly straightforward. Again, just keep doing the exercise. And then pushing the wave. And then just step in. Take your time, make sure you get into position before you try and move your foot. In the last instance, as you raise your toes and you start to bring your foot in, you'll probably feel there's a very slight extra shift, because it's not really until you get to here that you've got all your weight in that leg. Right up to that point to about here, some of your weight is still going to be in the empty leg. But we reach 100% as we bring the foot in. and shake out. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. There you are. The other side. And your back. And your hips. Belly. Upper part of the chest. Lovely. And shake out. Now, how much of that you've remembered and absorbed properly is unknown, really. But try and think of this last part of the session as a way not to think about, not to make notes in your head, but to really just let things settle so that you're able to properly know a few things. As always, you're welcome to ask questions, to go over things again. Remember, this session is being recorded and will soon be up on YouTube anyway. So there's lots of ways that you can go over this stuff again. More important to get the feeling that you're able to know what you've actually learned. Probably only one or two things that you picked up, than to grasp after everything and end up with nothing. So embrace tiger, return to the mountain. Sinking down, pushing up. Bring your hands around. It's not just your body that settles, it's your thoughts as well, just following the movement downwards to your feet. And then upwards, feeling the expansion into your fingertips. And that reversing. And rest. Check out. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So go and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mike. Good session.
Good. I'm glad it was useful. So
Thank you, Mike.
have a good day, everybody. See you
Thanks.
soon.